Welcome to part 2 of this series telling the story of Briggate. Briggate is one of the oldest and best known roads in the city of Leeds. It is over 800 years old and still retains pretty much its original dimensions and layout. Briggate is located in Leeds city centre, running south to north from Leeds Bridge to an intersection with the Hedgerow and New Briggate. This video looks at the middle and upper sections of Briggate, between Boar Lane and the Hedgerow. Part 1 focused on the lower section of Briggate, between Leeds Bridge and Boar Lane. The third video tells the story of New Briggate, a Victorian extension to this important thoroughfare. In the first programme, we discovered that Briggate, which means the road to the bridge, and Leeds Bridge itself played an important role in the development of the city. Briggate was in fact created in 1207 by Maurice Paynell, the lord of the manor. It was a manorial borough, a new town, laid out with an exceptionally wide road running north to south and connecting with Leeds Bridge. Let's now turn to the middle and upper sections of this important road. This is the junction of Briggate with Kirkgate. Kirkgate is even older than Briggate and is probably the oldest street in the city of Leeds. This was a very important point in the past, connecting the original settlement of Leeds at Kirkgate with the new town. Just up from here, in around 1618, a Moot hall was built between the buildings on either side of Briggate. A Moot hall was a meeting or assembly building, and it was the seat of Leeds Corporation, acting as the town hall until 1813. The Moot Hall in Briggate was rebuilt in around 1710. Here, the council and justices met on the first floor, whilst butchers' shops were located on the ground floor. To the east of the Moot Hall were the shambles, and to the west were the back shambles. Shambles were open-air meat markets and slaughterhouses. It is difficult to believe it was here today. It would have been a very different environment. You can see the Moot Hall in this map from 1725. The Leeds Market Cross is also located at the upper section of Briggate. The Market Cross showed that Leeds had the right to hold a regular market. By 1831, the Moot Hall had been demolished. The dramatic growth of Leeds by that time meant that larger premises were needed to conduct the business of the town. Council proceedings moved to Park Row and later to the new town hall. Although the markets also moved to purpose-built buildings on nearby Vicar Lane at the end of the Victorian era, Briggate continued to be a major attraction for shoppers throughout the 20th century and into the 21st. At the same time, it was one of the main routes through the city and traffic was very heavy. In the 20th century, trams were also competing for space on the street, until the 1950s, when the Leeds tramway closed. The huge throngs of shoppers battling with heavy traffic led to the often heard Leeds saying, "It's like the middle of Briggate," used to describe busy places. Traffic used to move in both directions, as you can see in this photograph from 1962. In a move to reduce congestion, Briggate became the 3-lane one-way street you can see in this photograph from 1979, but traffic was still considerable, particularly at peak times. Large traffic lighted crossings and even a subway were introduced to try to keep the shoppers safe. Eventually, it was decided to restrict traffic and pedestrianisation started in 1993. when only public transport vehicles were allowed to use the street. In 1996, it was closed to all traffic and, in phases from 2004 to 2006, Briggate was paved with York stone, removing the roadway and pavements that had remained. The section of Briggate between Ball Lane and the Hedgerow is home to many of the city's larger and influential stores, including Marks and Spencer's. Marks and Spencer's started out in Leeds, so it is appropriate they have a large store here on Briggate. Without the onset of World War II, a 23-storey skyscraper would also have stood at this location, which was once where the Rialto cinema existed. Plans were drawn up and the Rialto was demolished in 1938, but the plans had to be shelved because of the war. Marks and Spencer's moved from their first and smaller Briggate store at number 76 to this location in 1951. It makes you wonder what impact a skyscraper would have had on this section of Briggate. In addition to larger shopping premises, Briggate is also the location of a number of popular shopping arcades, including the oldest, Thornton's, built in 1878. Within Thornton's arcade is the Ivanhoe clock. The figures are all from Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, with Robin Hood in green, Friar Tuck in black, Richard the Lionheart in red, and Gurth the swineherd in khaki. One of the most well-known and visited of the arcades is the Victoria Quarter, comprising County Arcade, Cross Arcade and Queen Victoria Street, which was glazed over and incorporated into the development in 1989. County Arcade and Cross Arcade were built by the Leeds Estate Company, who commissioned theatre architect Frank Matcham. Matcham's newly constructed Empire Theatre, around which the arcades were built, was intended to form the focal point of a civic complex modelled on the Galleria in Milan. They were notable for their glazed barrel roofing decorated with copious amounts of faience from the local Bermontoft's pottery, a number of mosaics and plentiful use of marble. Matcham's development included the Empire Theatre. Many top-line stars appeared at the theatre, including Charlie Chaplin, but in 1961 it was demolished to make way for another arcade in contemporary style. In the 1990s redevelopment, the 1960s arcade that had replaced the Empire Theatre was demolished and replaced by a branch of Harvey Nichols, which opened in 1996 as the first branch of the luxury store outside London. Despite massive changes along this section of Briggate, it is still possible to see evidence of its past, and the overall layout of the original Briggate still remains. This plan shows how it was flanked by Burgage plots. The Burgage plots were long strips of land with a building which fronted onto Briggate and gardens behind. Over the centuries, and particularly in the 18th century, the long gardens were filled in with buildings, but we still see evidence of the Burgage plot layout today. This is the alley to Turk's Head Yard, part of a Burgage plot where Whitelock's alehouse first opened in 1715 as the Turk's Head. At that time, it would have catered particularly for merchants and market traders. The pub was especially busy on Tuesdays and Saturdays when Briggate Market was thronged with people. The pub became known as Whitelock's after a succession of licensees bearing that name, and it claims to be the oldest pub in the city centre. Other amazing examples exist on this section of Briggate. This is the alleyway entrance to the Ship Inn. The Ship Inn is reputed to have existed since the 1750s. These alleyways weren't just there to access the pubs though, they ran all the way through to the end of the Burgage plots, and as the town expanded, they became important thoroughfares. This alleyway, for example, was once the main route through to Land's Lane and is likely to have been very busy with people moving in each direction. Also in with the claim of being the oldest pub in the city centre is the Pack Horse, believed to have existed since at least the early 17th century, with records suggesting it opened in 1615. It has had a number of name changes along the way and has been called the Nag's Head and the Slip Inn before now. And not forgetting the Angel Inn, which opened in the late 18th century and was thankfully saved from closure at the start of the millennium. You get a clear sense of how the Burgage plots were filled in with buildings when you visit these lovely old pubs. It's incredible these yards still exist, and they are a real treasure. Briggate may be quieter nowadays, certainly in terms of traffic, but it remains an important thoroughfare and also an event space. Amazingly, farmers' markets are once again regularly held on Briggate, mirroring how people in the past made use of Briggate's open space and footfall. All around in the architecture, street names, alleyways and roads, clues remain to the street's important past. I wonder what is next for this important Leeds street. Thank you for subscribing to Geography Juice to see more videos like this. Press like if you have enjoyed this look at Leeds history. Check out the next video about New Briggate and all the other Leeds local history videos on the Geography Juice channel. Thank you for watching.